Introduction. In the Figure material, love is discussed. However, it becomes clear that the love that is being discussed is not the mushy, grasping, or humanitarian type love that is bandied around, but instead it is referring to a much more encompassing love.
This love concept can be seen as either affective or effective love, affective referring to more of the romantic style of love, and is characterized by its transient nature in that it comes and goes, rises to great heights, and then plummets to great depths, leading often to despair. Effective love, on the other hand, is a love that is based in our innermost being, and is in no way transient, can never transpire. This effective love is the love that creation is, and that we also can sense/perceive and feel. This translation below is another small description of creation's love. At another time I will post one on effective and effective love. Here is my authorized yet unofficial translation of a section of one of the Spirit Lessons, which is also to be found in Wissenworth's Note 3, and which was kindly checked by Web.
Robin Foley 1, Figu Landskap of Australia. Creation's Love. English translation. The Value of Knowledge. No. 3 pages 9 to 11. Love Teaching Letter No. 27, page 296.
No life is able to exist without love and without the light of truth. However, no light is able to exist without love and truth, and no truth is able to exist without light and love. True love is true being, and it is the everlasting warmth from the center of creation, which is described as true existence. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it nothing at all would be able to exist. The individual should therefore be aware that he exists only through the love of creation and that he carries this love also within himself. Creation created everything in love and logic and put the same love in all its creatures, so that life itself is love. Even if living in this world often seems to consist only of conflict and drudgery, this fact does not change. Life has become primarily a heavy and tough battle only because people have turned away from creation and have lost the knowledge of its existence. In undiminished size, however, creation lets its love become apparent nevertheless, through its creations. The person must only be willing to see and recognize this love, and he will begin to feel it. If he opens to the love of creation and he allows it to flow into himself, he becomes filled with respectful gratitude and great joy. Each smallest plant, each ever so tiny animal was created in love by creation, each creation existing according to the same law of love. All life is in the absolute perfection that which it should be through the love of creation, and except for humans, every life form lives exactly by this creation's plan. Only humans have turned away from love and must now learn again what true love is. The infinite love of creation connects all life, because in all life this love lies hidden. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. Its laws are so wonderfully arranged that people everywhere come up against its radiating love. If he, however, closes his senses, he may not feel it, empfinden, and hence he declares that there is no love in this world. But creation has formed and arranged everything so wonderfully so that people can recognize the majestic love of creation at every moment and in every place. Of course, one cannot easily go there, to contemplate nature and to feel, empfinden, the love of creation and also one's own love, especially not when for many years one has felt differently. The way to sense, erflen, the love of creation is primarily through thinking, because thinking influences feeling, flen. If, for example, one stands before a tree, one should become fully aware that this tree is the product of creative love, just as the forces of nature, which enable it to grow and to flourish. This action may seem to be somewhat ridiculous or maybe even embarrassing at the beginning because it is most unusual and, besides, the appropriate feelings, gefühl, are still missing. The longer, The more these thoughts affect loving feelings, joyful and spiritual fine sensitive feelings empfinden, and these in turn will make the bond with all life a certainty, that a simple blade of grass, a bird, a shrub or some other living creature is driven by the same love to fulfill its purpose in creation's plan, as humans should also do as the highest life form on the planet since a long time ago. The human carries a fragment of creation within, and therefore the love of creation within him is that power which he is able to evoke in himself. The more respectfully the love of creation in all life is perceived and is felt, empfinden, the stronger it also becomes in the person. Then suddenly love is no longer such an insincere and longingly hoped for experience, but the real spiritual fine sensitive feeling, empfinden, of one's own mental effort. So fine, thus satisfying and energizing, it permeates the whole person, and once extensively making progress, the person will take it on willingly to work on himself, namely to maintain this love, to extend and nurture it. For himself, but also for creation. The love is not unfathomably deep. It is immense power which never slept, active since ancient times, and immeasurably abundant, and logic-laden. Love flourishes splendidly in all beings, in animals and flowers, in the fields, in humans, in words, and also in singing, and forever it will permeate the world. Love will continuously be the purpose of existence, and ultimately it is given in logic.
Consciously develop and use love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others. Translation by Adam Di Rossini, 25th Sep 2013. Consciously develop and use love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others by Billy George Albert Meyer.
The developing of love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others is of immense significance and importance for every human being, because these values are the actual fundamental nature of the reality and its truth, as they are pre-given through the creational natural laws and recommendations. These four values alone profoundly determine the behavior and the actual leading of life and place the entire life and its impermanence, that is to say, mortality, in a positive light. If the fact of mortality is recognized and life is viewed and considered not as a finality, then the cognition also arises that it is worth the effort to develop love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others, and also to implement it in everyday life. With these four big values, the human being already frees himself or herself from the causes of many thought-feeling-based sufferings and pains, as well as from anxiety and fear in several respects in relation to the life, the dying and the death. If knowledge and wisdom are developed, especially through the teaching of the truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of the life, then both of these values show the way to another mode of existing, namely, to the death life, and to the rebirth of the spirit form, as well as to a new life through the birth of a new consciousness with a new personality. Much anxiety is able to be ended by recognizing and understanding this possibility and fact. Consequently, it is worthwhile carefully studying the nature of the love, of the knowledge, of the wisdom and of the feeling for others, because thereby cognitions are gained, which otherwise remain undetected. Love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others are therefore not only necessary for applying them usefully or connectively on one's own behalf and to fellow human beings, rather they also show a strong evolutive character and promote the ability to understand and to accept everything about life and the death. Concerning this, all four of the mentioned values are actually necessary, because in order to be able to understand everything, it requires the knowledge and the wisdom, whilst the accepting of the whole thing requires both the love and the feeling for others. In order to understand the reality of this fact, the intelligence must be used, because an acceptance regarding this needs a loving intention with deep feelings for others, which must be brought about, because only thereby can an effective accepting be developed. Hence, this in no form has anything to do with one simply accepting something, because perhaps the current logic or situation requires it due to coercion, which leaves open no other possibility, or because an accepting is of benefit in this instance for the daily life, for a certain activity or for an advantage. It is indisputable that, for the development of love, knowledge, wisdom, and feeling for others, a corresponding life-affirming attitude and righteous motive behavior is of necessity, whereby these values must already be learnt in infancy. However, concerning this, the decisive factors are the parents or guardians through whom a good and valuable upbringing and a motivation with deep feeling for others must be conveyed to the child who is to be brought up. Thereby it plays no role whether the parents or guardians are supporters of any belief or the truth, because only the feeling for others and the motivation with feeling for others as well as the sympathy in regard to these, which are being shown to the children, are important. And only through this feeling for others as well as through the love and the motivation with deep feeling for others, does the whole thing become effective. But concerning this, just as the children, through inappropriate upbringing, are already motivated with deep feeling for others, for the development of love and feeling for others as well as for knowledge and wisdom, so the human being, in having grown up, can do it on his or her own for himself or herself and dedicate himself or herself consciously to the creating of love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others. If a motivation with deep feeling for others is already conveyed during the childhood through the upbringing, then the human being remembers it all his or her life. The efficacy of the motivation is thereby dependent upon how empathically and profoundly it is influenced. In the case that the motivation has not taken effect either in the childhood or in having grown up, and thereby neither love, knowledge and wisdom, nor feeling for others can be developed, the wrongly and badly pronounced character and the upbringing-based inability of the parents or guardians is responsible for it. However, this indicates that the values of love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others are lacking with the parents or guardians themselves, or are pronounced only extremely weakly. Consequently, they also are not able to convey these to the ones who are to be brought up. Thereby the ones bringing up the children, namely the parents concerned, get a bad reputation. A sympathetic motivation with deep feeling for others for the development of love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others can be unlimited and spread the values arising from it everywhere. They are not only values, which are necessary for the forming process of the leading of life and of the behavior, because they also show deep grounding values concerning the technology, science, politics, medicine, jurisdiction, and in all areas of the existence in general, so therefore also in the economy. The principle of love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others must also exist in industry, in the business world, in agriculture and in all fields of work in general, because they are all led by human beings, just as the work output is produced by them also. However, human beings, no matter however and whatever they are, need attention and warmth and therewith also humaneness, which find expression, especially through love and feeling for others. However, also the knowledge and the wisdom belong to it, because these values are those which impart the human being with the necessary cognizance of how he or she has to handle and tackle something knowledgeably, as for example, with work, and how he or she must decide in one form or another if problems to be overcome demand his or her wisdom. If these high values were to be applied absolutely everywhere in all conceivable areas, then the human beings would muster more love for one another, as well as more peace, freedom and harmony, instead of indulging in scandals, harming themselves, fighting and hating each other, spreading terror and waging wars between themselves. The politicians would align their thoughts, ideas and their entire work to the interests of the humankind, respect them and rationally respond to their desires and wishes, instead of keeping them under an undemocratic and party dictatorial no. If early in childhood, the human being learns the value of the real love, of a good knowledge, of the wisdom and of the true feeling for others, then also his or her wrong views that strife, jealousy, discord, terror, warfare and other activities of gavolt are necessary and of use, or that everything evil would be just the nature of the human being, disappear. Truth is that he or she would also be very much less destructive or not at all destructive any longer, just as he or she would also no longer commit murder and acts of terrorism, would not exercise revenge any longer and also not carry out any more completely dehumanized acts of war and so on, and absolutely without any thoughts, feelings-based impulsations. The human being of the earth must consciously develop in himself or herself love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others, because only through these values he or she gains a sense for all-embracing responsibility, which he or she then also knows how to live out. If this actually happens, then all the unspeakable suffering, need and misery, and also the tremendous destructions and inhumane tragedies dwindle away, which, through acts of war, hate, revenge, murder and through other felonious acts are committed against human beings, and even against all of humanity, whereby also the science and technology are completely involved in it. If everything is viewed and considered only from the point of view of technological, medical, chemical and other sciences, as well as of progress and development, then all their inventions and achievements are magnificent accomplishments. However, what was wreaked upon the terrestrial humankind with them is more than just horrid. Not only have both world wars cost many dozens of millions of human lives, but so have all the gigantic masses of humankind and religious wars, revenge campaigns and atrocities between one another during the past 4 millennia. With all that, the scientific, physical, technological, medical and chemical inventions and achievements were the actual means of murder, of all the inestimable destructions and of all need of misery and of unspeakable suffering. Since time immemorial, monstrous and all-destructive and devastating weapons of all kinds like atom bombs, chemical shells and other deadly weapons have brought unspeakable suffering over the earth humankind, which is why from this point of view all the mentioned progress and the developments are to be assessed in an extremely negative form. And over all the time everything that is horrid was able to happen only because, up to the current time, the majority of earth humankind has striven for neither true love nor for effective knowledge according to the creational natural laws and recommendations, nor for real wisdom and also not for deep-grounding feeling for others. In all the time since wars, terror and murder have taken place and also continue to take place, the thoughts and feelings of the human beings in relation to their longing for love, knowledge, wisdom, feeling for others as well as for freedom, peace and harmony, and so on, were and are not included. Consequently, a boundary between right and wrong was and is also never set, whereby the mentioned high values were also never able to become effective, and also still will not be effective into the far future. Truthfully, it is the case that profit and victory over others are the only aspects which count. Consequently, every criminal, felon, politician, cleric, and other human being does not do anything inappropriate in his or her estimation if he or she does something which, in one form or another, brings profit or success in some way. For criminals and felons, everything is simply a completely well carried out deed or action if they achieve success with their criminal and felonious actions and machinations. For politicians, it is a personal might experience if they are able to enforce their ideas disadvantaging the humankind in the nation, whilst for the clerics it is a success experience if they gain new believers who are able to be exploited financially and can be guilefully bound to the belief. However, the fact that through all those mentioned, if they behave in the aforementioned context, great harm is inflicted, not only on the individual human being, rather on the entire human society, is not spoken of. Only when the general public figures out the criminal and felonious machinations, and everything is made public, are their deeds and actions labeled inappropriate, and the fallible ones are called criminals and felons. However, if everything is precisely viewed and considered, then the fallible ones must not only be pilloried, when tremendous damage based in the consciousness and psyche as well as in relation to the world of the thoughts and feelings, to body and life, financially or to goods and chattels, has already arisen to any fellow human being. Also, in this regard, love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others are extremely important, because through these values alone, those who come into harm can be helped, just as the fallible ones, who under certain instructing circumstances through these values are able to find the correct way in an overall good, social and societal norm-based mode of life. Hence the mentioned values also hold a key position in these regards and, if they are actually effective, are able to prevent one acting without thought or feeling. If loving, knowledge-based good, wise, and thoughts and feelings with deep feeling for others are in play, then a sense for human values also comes into being, and thereby the human activities also become constructive. If the religions, sects and wrong philosophies as well as their unhonest methods of their deeds and actions in relation to their catching of believers, and the financial exploitation and frequently also the sexual abuse of children, adolescents and even grown-ups are viewed and considered, then the talk can be neither of love, knowledge and wisdom, nor of feeling for others. Truthfully, to the contrary, all these values are trodden into the dirt and bring about harm to very many human beings, who, throughout their lives, suffer from the incurred unfairnesses, wrong and irrational teachings, and also from the other terrible things and machinations inflicted on them and lived through. Thus, instead of the teaching and spreading of the values, only harm is caused, because the fundamental humane attitude with deep feeling for others towards the human being and his or her dignity is lacking, just as the feeling for the other and the love for him or hers, however, as well as the knowledge and the wisdom in order to implement the whole thing. Thus it is also not surprising that still even today, in the so-called time of enlightenment, again and again through the false teachings and differences of the religions, sects and wrong philosophies, problems are evoked, which lead to murder and manslaughter, to terror and war, and also to revenge and hate. And this happens like this in the closest circle of family, friends, and acquaintances, just as in groupings and between nations and peoples. If the motivation which is humane and with deep feeling for others for the development of love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others is viewed and considered, which should already be bestowed upon the children through an appropriate upbringing, it is recognizable that this has fallen behind for thousands of years and up to the current time and is not applied anymore. However, this happens equally along the entire line of the virtues and the creational natural laws and recommendations, which are not perceived, not recognized, not learned, not understood and not followed. In the earliest times, that which is correct and valuable regarding this was still taught as true prophets walked over the earth. But even then the believers and representatives of religions, sects and wrong philosophies, with their irrational teachings, were mightier than the true prophets, whose teaching proclaimed the reality and the truth resulting from it. Nowadays the religious, sectarian and wrong philosophical belief is no longer in such strong demand and justifiably is considered by many human beings as delusional construction and also as already obsolete and overtaken by the scientific cognitions and their evidence. All the same, or more than ever due to this, the main religions and all the sects maliciously fanatically attempt to spread their delusional belief and gather new believers around themselves, whereby quite especially young human beings are captured for it and led into delusion. And this happens with consciously false and shammed love, with similarly influenced feeling for others and also with confused religious irrational teachings and alleged godly miracles, which are declared as reality and knowledge as well as wisdom. Through all these confused and irrational teaching-based machinations, the human beings lose the interest in deeper values, in true love, in valuable knowledge in relation to the reality and its truth, as well as concerning the wisdom, which makes it clear and understandable to everyone that also a true and honest feeling for others is a vital necessity, and that fundamentally every human being must develop in himself or herself all these profound values and bring them to use in life. Hence it is necessary that each individual turns to these values, learns them, and respects them throughout his or her life, because for every human being they are of the greatest preciousness, namely, no matter whether he or she hangs on to a religious, sectarian or wrong philosophical delusional belief and is completely trapped by it, or whether he or she lives in accord with the reality and its truth and according to the creational natural laws and recommendations. Love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others belong to every human being, namely, no matter how, what or who he or she is.
Billy Senjez's Ilvestar Center, 22nd January 2012, 23:55. Michaela/Pro1, 2012. One can talk or write about love, but it has no meaning to the reader/listener unless something within the reader/listener is awoken or recognized as actual. Words and ideas, for example, have their own inherent meaning imbued them by the writer. However, the reader must do the thought work in order to make the understanding complete for oneself. Although the material that Billy conveys is of utmost importance and validity, it is only through our own efforts that we can begin to glimpse and comprehend the wisdom and love behind the words. There is no other way. Words and ideas can point you in the direction, act as guides. However, truth, love, wisdom and understanding only have validity when they are integrated into one's daily life, lived and continually applied. It is a task that must be fulfilled in order that there be peace and logic. Application of understanding in one's life, in the day-to-day activities. Words can only convey so much. The rest is up to each individual to see for themselves the truth in daily application. Law of Love. First sample. What is love? This is a sample of the German version of the book Gesetz der Liebe by Eduard Albert Meyer. Page numbers 4 to 4. Translators Gerges. Date of original translation March 2006. Corrections and improvements made in /English translation.
Love is the absolute certainty that one lives with and coexists with everything. Thus, in everything which exists in fauna and flora, in the fellow humans, in every material and spiritual life form, no matter which kind, and in the existence of the entire universe and beyond. Love in its essential definition therefore means a feeling of absolute certainty that one lives together with all that exists in absolute certainty, and in the absolute feeling of this that the existence of the other is a part existence of one's own existence, no matter whether it deals with a plant, a spirit form, an animal, a planet, a stone or a fellow human. Love is the absolute certainty and the absolute knowledge and the absolute feeling and comprehension that all life is a fragment of one's own life, because everything together is an entire form in the eternal being of all existence, and only may exist in the knowledge and perception of love as the entire existence. Love, therefore, is the absolute knowledge and feeling, the absolute perception and empathy, in communion in original form with all existing life in all the entire universal forms and beyond, in the absolute wisdom of this, that one's own existence is also a part existence of every other existing life form, which is, however, just as much a fragment of one's own existence, and that, collectively, entire universal life forms only therefore exist because that truly is so. Love, human of the earth, is the first and last law of all being, therefore of life altogether. Without love no creation may form, and without love no transformation may be completed. Love is required for all changes of life, for being and not being, for light and darkness, for the coming and the passing away, for life and death, for everything and everything, and for everything in the existence altogether. Love, therefore, is the absolute wise comprehension, understanding, cognition, knowledge, ability, mastering and logic and certainty, as well as the feelings and feeling, and the absolute perception of one's own life in the life of the neighbor and in all else that exists, as a factor of the communion, in original form, with all existing life in all entire universal forms and beyond. In the absolute wisdom of this that one's own existence is also a part existence of any other existing life form, which is however, just as exactly a fragment of one's own existence, and that collectively the entire universal life forms, of every kind and form, only exist because it truly is so that everything and anything is bound together in love and forms one entire universal oneness.
True love has its basis in reality, not in belief. Vivian Legge, May 2012.
Few people would disagree that if there was more love in the world it would be a better place. It's easy to say. In families, work environments, groups and organizations we talk about the need to be more loving towards each other. But what does that really mean? Do we even know? Could we explain it to each other? How do we correctly go about forming a loving relationship with a coworker, a friend, a life partner? And how do we make it grow? Love is not just a wonderful idea. In his book, Gesetz der Liebe, The Law of Love, Billy explains that love is essential for all evolution and life. Without love, nothing can be created, and no transformation can occur. Love is necessary for all change. Juan Billy Gulp, 34, says that the earth human being is not evolved enough to be able to create true, wisdom-based love within himself or herself. Only a few human beings on earth are on the threshold of this highest form of wisdom, creational love. The majority still lives in the lower forms of false, affective love. Is it any wonder then that so much goes awry on this planet, if the very growth medium for our evolution is inadequate? Fortunately, with enough striving and effort, we can actually begin to learn what love really is by observing the difference between genuine love and the false love which is predominantly practiced on this planet. Wisdom-conditioned love is
a harmonious state of absolute connectedness in all things in indestructible form without temporal limits. 15.
Billy explains that, in contrast to false love, wisdom-conditioned, genuine love is a wellspring of eternal constancy, which is absolutely independent of the human being's age, appearance and personality. Gulp. 15. With a false form of love, however, factors like age, appearance and personality do play an important role. Gulp. 18. As does one's material wealth, profession and societal position, and such things. But such factors are only as pronounced as the degree of durability and constancy of a human being's personality. Therefore, this emotion-based, false form of love is subject to enormous fluctuations in its intensity, and can thus suffer changes and can even transform into rage and hatred. Billy's deeper explanations of these two types of love, the genuine, affective love and the false, affective love, serve as an invaluable instruction manual for analyzing, deepening or transforming our own personal forms of love which we have for our fellow human beings and all other things and beings with which we share our existence. It may be easy to assume at first glance that the concept of love should be simply understood in the familiar way as presented to us by the world's religions. But a closer look at how love is explained, in this renewed teaching of the truth, shows us the critical difference between the renewed teaching, with its all-important focus on reality, and religious teachings. This spiritual teaching of Billy Meyer and the Pleiadians extraterrestrials concerns itself with things which exist in reality, and which can sooner or later be discovered by every individual if sufficient effort is made to do so. It concerns the actual reality of creation's laws and thus also of nature's laws. But religious teachings concern themselves with belief which requires no logical evidence and breeds up delusion which removes us from reality. Many interested readers have read Extraterrestrial Semi-Essay's introduction to this spiritual teaching, in which she also states that the earth human being does not know love. And, if we continue to study and contemplate this spiritual teaching, we increasingly come to learn that, on the whole, we earth humans do not know love because we do not concern ourselves with reality. Instead, we concern ourselves with delusion and belief, which is one reason why our modern-day prophet condemns the pervasive religious teachings on this planet. In their defense, religious enthusiasts speak of the love taught and promoted by religion, but love itself, which is essential for evolution, is thwarted by the non-reality basis of belief in religious dogmas. Love is not situated in the heart and is not the power of a god. In Die Art zu Leben, How to Live Life, Billy 34 explains that true love is a conglomerated form of fine spiritual perception, Empfindung, and is not built upon emotions, because it is fine spiritual, fine fluidal perception itself. So, true love comes from this fine spiritual perception of reality. Such a perception of reality comes from the respectful, concentrated observation and registering of that which is. It comes from perceiving, at a fine spiritual level, the nature of another human being, creature, or some other element or thing. So, the knowledge and wisdom acquired this way, through meditative concentration on the reality of a thing, results in the experience of love. However, the ability to exercise such concentrated observation is something we Earth humans rarely possess, and therefore we must develop it through hard, ongoing practice, often over a period of many years. Billy therefore teaches the prime importance of learning concentration itself. This is required for the development of many powers of the consciousness, but also for our creation of love. With such a practice we concentrate, without interruption, on a single object. We do this without prejudice in thought processes, and just by registering what is, rather than imposing interpretations upon it. From this process we gain knowledge and understanding, which allow us to experience true wisdom-based love. So, for love, we need thoroughness, attentiveness, and Billy says a normal degree of rationality. We also need respect, which means respect for reality, and for other beings, and this has nothing to do with self-abasement or putting another being on a pedestal. Billy explains that there are many different forms which love can take, which apply for different types of life forms and between them as well, and which serve this specific relationship between those life forms. For example, there is a specific form of love which a human being has for a plant, but love, as it quite especially relates to the human being, is a capacity given in the human existence for the development of an intensive, positively experienceable relationship with a fellow human being. Gulp. 16. This love enables us to assist each other in our evolution. Especially the form of love called Bundesliebe love or bond love, which is structured around the raising of children, provides this intensive, evolutionary opportunity, which explains the great importance placed on maintaining such a love relationship for a lifetime in the case of the Pleiadians, even for several centuries. However, without the necessary love there can be no constancy and no evolution. Gulp. 63. So our obligation to evolve explains why it is important to find a stable, ongoing love relationship, and why a loveless relationship cannot provide that evolutionary opportunity. Above all, Billy repeatedly draws our attention to the following definition of love.
Love is the absolute certainty that one collives and coexists in everything, thus in all that which exists within fauna and flora with one's fellow human beings in each and every material and spiritual life form regardless of its kind within the existence of the entire universe and beyond. 7.
When we truly want to secure love in ourselves, our fine sensitive perceptions must make it apparent to us that we know and feel the connectedness of co-living with and coexisting with our neighbor, and our neighbor co-living with and coexisting with us. If we don't feel this, then we are not yet capable of true love. Gulp. 8. Billy explains Gulp. 17. That genuine love develops in the human being according to the development of his or her ratio, being his intelligence, reason, cleverness and his morality. And until we have reached that level of development we are limited to the affective forms of love, which, in the meantime, do provide a structure from which genuine forms of love may eventually develop. Reason and understanding are especially decisive in genuine love, and determine how the human being wants to form and conduct all his or her affairs. Therefore, reason and understanding determine whether these matters are to be positive or negative or neutral positive balanced. In much Durkheimian might of the thoughts Billy repeatedly describes the connection between our rational choice in favor of neutral positive balanced thinking, and the resulting reward of love along with harmony and peace, and so forth. Since we lack understanding about true love and fine spiritual perception and so on, it is usually very difficult or impossible to recognize which form our love actually is, and whether it is even love at all. The following explanations are therefore enormously helpful. Genuine love arises solely in the fine spiritual perception realm of the human being's spiritual world, and it arises as a result of intentional experience and wisdom. Billy Gulp. 16. This genuine love radiates across into the half-material realm of the psyche where the human being becomes conscious of it via his or her feelings in the form of elation and sensitivity, hopeful and painful. The human being experiences this genuine love in a form of a highly sensitive experiencing such sensibility in Erlebenskill. 17 And it is not subject to any fluctuations of highs and lows and therefore not to any kind of jealousy. Jealousy does not occur at all with genuine, with love from the fine spiritual perception world of this spiritual realm. Nothing at all can injure such a love in its absolute security and constancy, and it can only increase. Interestingly, the waves or vibrations swing engine. Billy says swinging waves is the more correct translation associated with fine spiritual perception. Love are neither limited nor obstructed by any objects, and thus do not depend on a certain proximity between those individuals generating and receiving the love. These waves radiate through everything, either material or immaterial, without losing any speed or intensity. Gulp. 35 They travel at 107,000 times the speed of light. In contrast to genuine love, affective love is created by the human being's thinking and his or her volition, according to visual, acoustic, feeling-based, and sensual impressions, impulses, information, perceptions, and so on. And so, many kinds of material factors are decisive in the creation of the feelings of love, and these are factors which can pass away. So, the human being's thinking, and therefore his or her feelings as well, bring about a constructed state which is based on his or her will, and it creates the illusion that he or she has a positive experiential relationship with another human being. But this is really only very fragile because all these related thoughts, feelings and wishes are false. There are many things from which the human being draws to create feeling-based, affective love for another human being, as a result of his or her thinking and will. This include body type, voice, the way of speaking or moving, the clothing and profession, and so on. The oscillations/swinging waves associated with this false, affective love travel only at the speed of light and are therefore interrupted by obstacles and become weaker the further they travel away from their origin. This means that this type of love is increasingly eroded the more those experiencing such a love for each other are apart. Objects, walls, distances and other waves or vibrations all weaken the effect of such waves. Eventually, with sufficient interruption, there is nothing left of them at all. Gulp. 35 Not only do we have a common misperception on Earth about the origin of true love, we also apparently misunderstand the role it plays in our lives. As mentioned, love facilitates evolution. Love cannot simply be equated with peace and harmony and a trouble-free existence. For our evolutionary process we evidently require hard learning experiences, and love is the great facilitator for this. Billy explains Up. 33 that love even torments us because it contains foregoing and demands into which we have to adjust ourselves, which we are often very reluctant to do. He says that the paths of love are often hard touchstones of life, and quite often difficult and steep. Love brings about the growth of the human being, but it also brings about the necessary pruning away of dead and diseased wood. A further metaphor Billy provides which really brings home to me what a creative, transformative effect true love has on us, is the following.
In love, the human being is like a grain which is threshed, sieved, and freed from the chaff in order to be immediately ground into meal and then kneaded until supple, after which the controlled fire raises the leavening and bakes a loaf of bread which, as a work of love, nourishes all. 34.
False love, which results from emotions and urges, can be steered, and this is done according to our emotional and urge-based wishes and thoughts. However, we cannot steer the course true love takes, but it steers us in the course of our lives because it is the highest, creational natural factor of all life and logic. How inspiring it is to think of love as our evolutionary growth medium, which, responding to conscious effort, also grows as we do.
And it is the human being's obligation to experience and make useful this true love for himself or herself as well as for his or her fellow human beings. To perceive this love and to feel its warmth, its peace, its happiness, and its joy. And only in the human being who is able to glimpse the connecting light of true love and perceive it within himself or herself, and who never allows the glow of the fire of true love to become cold, and allows the flame of pure love to flare up to new brightness and warmth in order to progress along life's way by means of this true love, is the purpose of life fulfilled as well as life itself in all its nuances. I Billy in question wissen sin and wish it, a little bit of knowledge, sense and wisdom. 205.
Vivian Leg.